my first question is, I was looking on this pamphlet right here.
Yep.
And one of the things that obviously stuck out to me was reverse racism. And so my question to that is, I've always thought too that, although I agree with that, I've always thought too that prejudice and discrimination are inherently tied to, historically rooted and entrenched institutionalized forms of systemic racism, and hierarchies and injustice and power imbalance. And so my question here is, if you believe in this kind of power structures that have existed and continues to exist, how might you go about reconciling these structures?
All right, guys, so we got to react to, yet again, another excellent clip from Vivek Ramaswamy. And this time it has to do with the race conversation, okay? And what happened here is, on the campaign trail in Iowa, he was confronted by a black pastor on reverse racism being racism, which is something that Vivek has talked about quite a bit in his campaign. And I think that this is probably one of Vivek's strongest attributes, is his ability to talk about race and the race problem, which, is only a problem because the left makes it a problem in this country. And conversations like this are really worth highlighting, because I think that this is the perfect way for you to talk about race and to combat the left's narrative when it comes to race. And I think that, again, Vivek did an amazing job of calmly, explaining to this pastor why reverse racism is wrong, or what I would call just racism, right? Because that's what it is, and that you can't discriminate against other people to correct for racism in the past. And I think that he does an excellent job of explaining why, right? And I want to react to it because, again, this right here, the conversation like this, these type of conversations that, I think Vivek should try to have on a national stage. And I think that the country needs to hear what he has to say on this issue. But this is not the type of race conversation that the left wants to have, right? The only type of racism conversation the left want to have is about why it is justifiable to continue to discriminate against whites, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
We don't have these kinds of open conversations anymore in this country. And so the heart of the question, let me summarize it, is reverse racism is racism. You agree with me on one hand, but on the other hand, how does that account for historical injustices in this country, including power structures that may be based on inequalities grounded in race? It's the heart of the question? Yeah, fair. Thank you. So here's my view on this. Have we been perfect through our national history? Absolutely not. Right? I mean, we had slavery for 160 years. There was a civil war fought over it. Some people learned that later in life than others, but that's okay. But that's history, right? It's American history, and so the question is, what do we do about it now? So I'll give you my honest, sort of candid feelings about where we are. Was there a time and place for correcting for those past injustices? Yeah, I think it was like in 1870. And did we do a perfect job of it? No, we didn't.
Yeah, I agree with him on that, right? And this is something I've said before, when people want to have the conversation about reparations and, hey, I just put it out there. Yeah, I don't believe that reparations today is the correct course of action in order to remedy what happened in the past. In fact, I think a lot of things in regards to remedying what happened in the past is people taking advantage of the current opportunities that we all have today, okay, as American citizens to get ahead. But the time for reparations, if there was going to be reparations, was during Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The country was essentially bankrupt, and black people did not get the reparations that they should have gotten after the Civil War. And I've always said, look, if I was born during the 1860s, 1870s, I would have said, yeah, black people need to get reparations. I'll be pro-reparations. But fast forward 150, 160, 170 years past the Civil War, I don't think that reparations is the answer anymore. Okay, I don't think it's the answer. And part of the reason why is because we have had government programs like, for example, Lyndon B. Johnson's The Great Society, his War on Poverty, that have, money, millions, billions of dollars that have went to black communities. We have had investments in these communities. But despite all this, look at the issues that we still have today with black communities and black people, which is, elevated crime, single motherhood, poverty, problems that were actually being solved before affirmative action and these welfare state programs that were introduced by Democrats. Like, for example, from 1940 to 1960, black poverty had fell over 40%. And also on top of that, black incomes were rising relative to whites. Crime was down. The homicide rate was a lot less among black people. Also, single motherhood was a lot less among black people. Well, why is that? It's because the family was intact, okay? The family was intact. And one of the reasons why the family was intact is because you didn't have the government essentially incentivizing black women to marry the government instead of be with their man and to be a part of a traditional nuclear family and to raise kids and to work and live that way, right? Which, again, is the greatest and the best anti-poverty program in this country, which is the nuclear family, okay? I think the key for black people in order to level the playing field is really a return back to the culture and values that black America had before Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society program during the 1940s and 1960s. Again, where the black family was intact, okay, and at its strongest. We saw the black family prosper more in regards to just closing the gap more than any anti-poverty program could ever achieve, okay? And one of the reasons why I believe this is because when you look at some of these immigrants, like, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy's family, or, maybe even if families of people that come from places like Africa, Nigeria, or whatever, they come over here and they're so-called people of color. They're black, so therefore they are subject to the so-called systemic racism, but yet they still achieve, right? They still are able to, reach the upper echelons of society. Like, for example, Barack Obama is half African, half East African. I don't necessarily know about half black, but half East African. He was able to become president of the United States despite being a so-called black man, right? You have people that come over here, these families, they come over here, these immigrants, they come over here and they dominate. And the reason why is because they have a culture that values the family and hard work, right? I mean, I have friends, particularly Indian friends, their families have come over here and they had nothing. And essentially they started by buying hotels, or they buy one really bad, terrible hotel. They would live in the hotel. They would run the hotel. They would save money. They would live frugally, and then they would buy another hotel. Okay. And then they keep repeating the same thing until they have a ton of hotels or a ton of gas stations, and they would all help each other in the community. They were looking out for each other. There was strong family values. And that is how they essentially dug their way out of poverty in one generation, despite the fact that, hey, they came over here with nothing, okay? And they also, are subject to the so-called systemic racism. And this is something that happens all the time. It happens all the time. And that's why you have some of these people, the so-called FBAs. This is why they get so upset with people like Vivek, and some of these, immigrants and tethers, right? Is because they essentially prove that black people not succeeding in this country has nothing to do with racism as much as it has to do with values and work ethic. And that really pisses them off because it destroys the race grift, right? It destroys the race grift, and they can't have that, right? They can't have their racism industry fall apart. And that's why they don't really like people like Vivek Ramaswamy, because he is a counter example to the systemic racism narrative and the fact that, it's holding people down when it's not really holding you down, okay? Your own actions and behaviors are holding you down more than so-called racism.
But at a certain point in time, I think that what you would think of as racism in this country, or you could fill in the blank, sexism, or any other ism or form of discrimination, it gets to be small enough, not to be zero, but small enough that the best thing we can do is let it atrophy to irrelevance. And if otherwise you try to attack it, it's like an immune system. My background is in biology, so sometimes I think in these kinds of analogies, but it's like an immune system trying to fight a virus. long after the virus is gone, or almost gone even, it starts to just attack its own organs. That's what I see happening in the country. And so here's my view, to make that kind of abstract reflection a little simpler. Today, the best way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race.
Facts. Facts. It really is. Okay, because all they're doing is creating more racism when you decide that, hey, well, we're going to discriminate against these groups of people just so that we can correct what happened in the past. And now you're creating a injustice towards people who had nothing to do with what happened in the past. And now, fast forward, 20, 30 years later, these same people will be saying, well, you discriminated against me before in the past. Therefore, I need reparations, right? Or I need to have some discrimination done towards other groups of people who have benefited from the discrimination against me, right? It just creates a cycle of what you would call, I guess, systemic racism that actually really never solves the problem. What will actually really solve the problem is people letting it go and understanding that, hey, we live in a time where everybody has opportunity. They're not major institutions that are holding you back, okay? They're not laws on the books that are specifically designed to hold you back as, a so-called person of color anymore. You can achieve what you want to achieve if you put in the work, okay? Now, obviously, some people may have it easier than others for whatever reason. But, hey, these are the same factors and same disadvantages that anybody, even if you're white and if you're in poverty and you grew up in a trailer park and, bum F nowhere, yeah, they're going to experience some of the same issues trying to achieve upward mobility, right? Your problems in regards to achieving upward mobility out of poverty is not just specific to you because of race. These are issues that everybody experiences when you're coming from poverty. But regardless, you still have opportunity, okay? Especially considering technology, the internet, right? There's so much opportunity for people just because of the internet, right? Just because of the internet. People do have much more opportunity they did before in the past. And I think people got to understand how to take advantage of that. And the easiest way to figure out how to take advantage of that is to stop boohoo whining and complaining and to educate yourself and to arm yourself with skills and knowledge in order to achieve that upward mobility that you're looking for, right? This is why I say that, the best way to get your reparations is essentially to gain skills, right? Gain access to skills that otherwise would have cost a lot of money to achieve or to get before, but now is essentially free because of the internet, right? The internet, man. It's really that simple.
I believe. And I think that in the name of anti-racism, which is a movement that calls out for us to be more race conscious of the differences, to correct for them, I think we've actually created more racism in this country. And it's sad because, I've started businesses, of multiple different businesses this campaign. It turns out I've hired people of every combination you could probably not every combination, but most combinations you could imagine of race and gender and this or that or the other thing. In one case, it was a black woman who was in a senior position of authority. One of the well-compensated, high position of authority. A lot of people would be jealous of that position and want it. And I heard, right, somebody who's upset she's above the hierarchy. She just got her job because she's a black woman. She's checking a box. And that hurt me, not because I took it as an insult, because I don't hire people that way. But it hurts me to say that's unfair to her.
Facts. It is unfair to her. Okay, and this is why I have a problem with all these affirmative action hires, and this is why I have a problem with affirmative action in general, because it puts black people in positions where they probably shouldn't be, they're not qualified to be in, and then they end up doing a terrible job, and then people point at that person and say, hey, look, see, this is an example of how, hey, black people should be in these positions. Or that, well, she's only in this position because of affirmative action, not because she actually earned it. It makes successful black people who've actually earned their positions, who've earned the things they have, who've earned their wealth, it makes it look less credible and less legitimate. It looks like they can't really compete, right? It's a slap in the face to every black doctor or black lawyer or black engineer in this country. It really is. And this is why I think that, again, the affirmative action stuff, a lot of it really is more detrimental to black people than it is helpful.
It's not fair to anybody. It's not just to anybody to stand for a system where we see each other as called upon to see each other on the basis of the color of our skin. And so at a certain point, the right answer is, I think we have to move forward. If we drive with our eyes in the rearview mirror, we're just going to keep crashing the same car and recreating the very thing we wanted it to eradicate. So that's what I believe. And that's why I'm against, what you'll call, what does that refer to? Reverse racism, like affirmative action, right? Quota systems, direct or indirect. I'm against them because I think they're inherently divisive. They're anti-meritocratic. I think they're anti-American at their core. And so you will never, it's kind of like, in a philosophical sense, like the answer to the first question. We're never going to defeat the people who disagree with us by censoring them, by using the tools of the opposition against them. So I say that in the category of speech. Well, we Republicans have been censored, and we have. Conservative speech has been censored, so we're going to come back and censor you. We're never going to win that way because you lose the very thing we're fighting for. So it's the same thing. Well, we experienced racism. Now we're going to get racism in reverse. We never win by using the toolkits of the other side. And you're on a higher pay grade than me as a pastor. I'm just running to be president, but you're operating on a different plane. But I think that it's something that you might think of as mercy. At a certain level, what is our path forward as a country? At some point at some point in time. I mean, there's a time for justice and there's a time for mercy. And those two things are in tension with one another, right? And I think at this moment we live in, I got a question yesterday. Somebody asked me a question. He said, what was the cause of the Civil War? And do you think that there's a civil war in this country right now? I think we are skating on thin ice as a country right now. I think we are in the middle of a cold cultural civil war right now. I don't want to see it turn hot. But I think it's going to require a combination of both justice, accountability for those who have committed those wrongs, with a blindfold of justice, but also some level of saying we will move on as a country. And so that's what I believe. And so hopefully that addresses your question for how I think about it. Not denying past inequity, but by acknowledging that at a certain point we're going to do about as well as we could, and then we decide the best thing for all of us is to aspire to our ideals. And this is what makes America beautiful. Are we a perfect nation? No, we are not. We never have been, and we never will be. Because here's why. I can tell you why it will never be the case. There's two things that are true about us. We're human beings, we're not gods. And we're still a nation that has ideals. See, it's interesting how nobody calls China hypocritical, or Iran, or Pakistan, or anywhere else. You don't hear the allegations of those nations being hypocritical. To be hypocritical, you had to have ideals in the first place. So as a nation that has ideals, and a nation that's comprised of human beings, we will always fall short of those ideals. But we're founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union. The pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. That is what makes America great. That is what makes America itself.
Yeah. So again, that's an excellent job by Vivek. Again, it's conversations like this that I think would be a reason why Vivek would be a good VP pick, even though I go back and forth myself in regards to whether or not picking somebody like him would actually give Trump the best chance to win, considering how politically, from a policy perspective, I think that they're extremely similar. Okay. And I think that sometimes, when you're talking about, trying to pick a VP, you got to pick somebody that can kind of balance you out. That's historically how they've done it. But I think one of the reasons why Vivek could possibly be a good pick for Trump is because he's probably the best Republican I've ever seen talk about the race issue, right? And he's not afraid to talk about a race issue. He doesn't shy away from the race issue. And he talks about it in a way that is truly a unifying message. And that message needs to be put on a national stage, right? That's the type of message that we need to hear at a presidential debate, okay, or at a, MSNBC or CNN or NBC town hall where you have a bunch of, liberals and progressive watching. I think that type of message needs to be put on the national stage. And I think his ability to, again, speak to this issue of race in the way that he does is one of the reasons why I think that he, could be a good VP pick, even though I'm not entirely sure if he would be the best VP pick considering the current politics in our country, where it seems like the most important issue in this country is abortion. But, you know, if you take that out of it, yeah, I mean, I think that message, again, would greatly benefit this country if it was put on a national stage. So, again, kudos to Vivek once again, man. He's killing it, right? He's killing it. I've never seen a candidate like him before in the past, and I really hope that he overperforms in these primaries. I really hope that the polls are wrong in regards to his numbers, because I don't understand how any American, right, you can see a candidate like that and, you know, he doesn't get, you know, at least a significant amount of support in this country. I really don't get it. But, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.